date paste is a very big product. It's typically used in snack bars and bakery, a lot of different uses for date paste.
So as an ingredient, as opposed to an end product?
Yeah, spot on.
Hello and welcome to Food Waste Matters, where we're spotlighting some very cool and practical ways people are making a difference in the food waste fight. I'm Dr. Joanne Freeman from Honey and Fox, and today's episode is all about dates. I had no idea that dates are such an important world crop, with a world production in 2022 of around 9.7 million metric tonnes. The main production areas, and not surprising, are the countries in the Middle East and North Africa. Other production areas include southern United States, with some production in Australia, but it remains really limited, even though our climate is suitable for growing grapes. But there is an exception. The Gurra Downs Date Company in the Riverlands in South Australia have made their mark to become a significant player in Australia and are now exporting their product all over the world. Today, we'll be speaking with Dave Reilly from Gurra Down Dates, and besides growing amazing dates, they are creating some amazing products from their waste, or what they commonly call their seconds, or not quite up to their very high standards. But as you'll hear from Dave, producing dates is not for the light-hearted, taking anywhere up to 7 years to bear fruit. So good morning, Dave, and welcome to Food Waste Matters. Dave, I was lucky enough to visit your farm earlier this year, and I remember from our visit that you planted your first date palm right back in 1998. So Dave, can you tell us a bit more about Dave Reilly and Gurra Down Date?
Good morning, Joanne. Good to catch up again. Yes, we did plant our first date palm in 1998. The catalyst for that was the water quality from Gurra Downs in South Australia. It's a property in the Riverland, approximately 2.5 hours drive from Adelaide, hour and a half drive from Mildura. We're on the Murray River. So our venture into date palms started back in the late 1980s. My wife, Anita, and myself set up a small horticultural farm. We had overhead sprinklers and we were irrigating vegetables, predominantly pumpkins. And when we set up in 1989, we had really good water quality right through to 1993. We had, I think, 7 floods in 5 years, so the water quality was always good. But come 1993, the Gurra wetlands didn't receive any more flood. It was actually the start of the millennium drought years. Not that we knew that at the time, but our biggest problem was we got to about 1996 and we started to really struggle growing vegetable crops because the water was so salty, it would just burn the leaves of the plants when we irrigated. And then it became obvious to us that this could actually be a really big problem. So we thought, well, what are we going to do? So we then ventured into wine grapes, and we had some special stock that grafted onto a rootstock that was salt tolerant. So we had Shiraz and also Cabernet Sauvignon, which were grafted onto salt tolerant rootstocks. And we thought, well, that's the answer. So we planted those out, and they grew well for the initial years, early years. And then we started to have salt burn on the leaves, even though we were putting water on through drippers, and our yield was starting to decline. And it became rather obvious that our water quality was still an issue, even for salt-tolerant rootstocks on wine grapes. So it was a decision. I guess we were at the crossroads then, whether we either roll our swag and move on, try to find something easier, or in the hope that the Gurra would receive another flood and water quality was going to be a good quality enough to use for horticulture again. So we basically researched a lot of salt tolerant crops. For example, olives, pistachios, lucerne. But, we just kept coming back to date palms because they were on a tolerance level, really probably the highest salt tolerant fruit bearing crop known. Very, very salt tolerant. And then also when we started to look into the marketing angles, I would describe date palms as being a high value crop. But there was no planting material in Australia. There was just nothing around, so it wasn't an easy challenge to face. In 1998, we planted our first date palms. We actually went to the far north of South Australia and harvested some offshoots of some historic trees, which more than 100 years earlier Muslim cameleers had planted. And also there was some importation of offshoots back in 1884 from the French government gifted plants to the colony of South Australia, and there was quite a program in the early 1900s in the far north of South Australia. So we went up there, harvested these wild offshoots from these trees, came back, planted them at Gurra Downs, and the more I researched the international date industry, the more I realised, well, actually what you need is recognised cultivars, selected cultivars in which then you can market the fruit by cultivar name, e.g. Medjool, Bahi, and many others. What we had planted were seedlings from 100 years earlier, so they just weren't going to really be a desirable fruit type even when we got them up to fruit-bearing age. So that sent us on a bit of a journey. We realised that we needed selected cultivars, and there was none available in Australia, no pest or disease-free cultivars in Australia. So we made contact with Australian Quarantine, and we asked them how we could go about importing plants. And it's quite a long story, but the discovery was that we needed to import in vitro tissue culture plants that basically arrive in test tubes. The challenge to Anita and myself was that we had no skills in that area. How do we handle these very, very delicate plants? So we went to Adelaide, for 2 years consecutively, on and off. We commissioned a professor to give us some training in how to micropropagate and handle tissue culture plants and hardening off, and we devoted a lot of energy to that. And then following that, we had just enough confidence to build a resourceful facility here at Gurra Downs on our farm, and formed a wonderful relationship with an English company called DPD, who were supplying plants to all the date growing countries around the world.
Well, that's amazing that it's an English company. You wouldn't think that. You'd think it'd be, from traditional markets like the Middle East. Why England, do you think? Why are they such a world leader in this space, Dave?
Well, that is a remarkable story because the climate of England, the UK, is not suited to date production at all. So you're right in picking up on that. The UK, DPD, date palm developments, are pioneers in the field of micropropagation. So they have been going now for more than 30 years. And they're one of the very, very first ones. And basically, they've got very good skills in the micropropagation of date palms. So their duty is kind of like travelling the world, looking at the most desirable genetics, and then they micropropagate those genetics so that then they can return large numbers of commercial plants to date growing regions around the world. We were very fortunate because that's a very expensive exercise to set up the micropropagation and to do all the selection work. But we were in a very fortunate position because we could get onto DPD and they'd supply the same plants to us in relatively small numbers that otherwise wouldn't have been obtainable had they not have massive orders to supply the other major date growing countries of the world. So all of these years later, we've managed to import many, many, many genetics, cultivars that are predominantly the best selections, modern day selections right around the world. and we've been able to access those genetics. So it's been a wonderful relationship.
A long journey as well to get to where you are today. So, Dave, on that, so
Yeah.
you grow dates, but
Yes.
what do you do? But what about your waste? What do you do with the waste?
Yes, well, there's two main streams of waste. You have the date fruit, so there's always reject fruit, and then there's fibre. So there's a lot of prunings, fruit arms, etc., that come off date palms. So I'll talk about the fruit because we're probably more developed there. So we actually started to sell our first lot of fruit in 2009, and we're currently enjoying a good harvest period now, and that's our 15th consecutive year of selling dates into the Australian market. A little bit internationally, but mostly into the Australian market. And yeah, you're right. There's always lower grades of fruit, and that's historically it was a problem in the early days because what we would do is we'd sell the first grade fruit, and that was always easy to sell because it looked good, tasted great, fantastic. But then there'd be irregular shapes and sizes, and then a little bit of skin separation. And the second grade fruit was very sound, but just didn't look as attractive. And in the early years, what we would do is we'd package that up, and we would still sell that as whole dates, and it'd be at a lower price. But then we started to have problems because, we'd be supplying customers and in the cities, and on one side of the street, you'd have a guy selling A-grade fruit from Gurra Downs, and then the guy opposite the road to him in his shop, he'd be selling the second-grade fruit, and there wasn't enough distinction between, what was first and second, and then I'd get some cranky phone calls from the guy selling the first grade saying, well, how come he's selling his cheaper than I can buy mine? And anyway, it really meant that we needed to withdraw our second grade fruit from sale because we were creating turmoil, chaos on the street, but also diminishing our brand name because people would recognise the second grade fruit, not realising we had grades above that. So we started to withdraw that. And then we thought, well, what can we do with this fruit? Historically, lower grade fruit, the really low grade fruit was getting fed to geese and sheep, so we were getting zero return on it, and that seemed to be a huge waste because it was still very, very nutritious, but just we didn't have the confidence to sell it as entire fruit. I was fortunate enough to pick up an Australian Nuffield farming scholarship in 2012. And that allowed me to travel around the world looking at different processing facilities for dates in the big factories, and it made me realise that date paste is a very big product. It's typically used in snack bars and bakery. Lot of different uses for date paste.
So, as an ingredient, as opposed to an end product.
As an ingredient, yeah, spot on. As an ingredient, it's produced in large amounts internationally, and so we realised, right, well, we really need to invest in date paste. So we basically built a purpose-built shed, hooked up 3-phase power, and imported date paste making equipment. All very expensive, but we could see that that's really probably the number one solution for using lower grade fruit, turning out a high quality product. So we're just at the start now of producing date paste, and we've just made our first sale of date paste this month. So we're on the board and we're quite excited. We've had a few contacts now from manufacturers that want to use Australian grown product in their snack bars. So we're very optimistic that we'll find a home for the date paste, and the price we're setting on that is, pretty close to our top grade price, which is still quite a lot dearer than imported date paste, but we're just going to hold our ground and recognise our input costs with labour in Australia, etc., is a lot higher, and rather than trying to compete on a price basis against imported fruit from low wage societies, we're going to hold our ground, and so far there's been pretty pretty good interest in the paste product.
So, Dave, is it quite labour intensive turning the dates into a paste?
It's certainly got a labour content to it, but it's not too onerous. No, we're basically tipping the fruit in a hopper at one end, and the paste comes out another end, and it's about packaging the paste and also separating the seed. So there is a seed component. The machine that makes the paste has a chute. The seeds drop out of one chute whilst the paste goes into it through another. So we also have date seed, and we again are finding a home for that. Not directly, but we're not developing any product from date seed, but we have some other businesses interested in making a coffee substitute using the date seed. So we supply them with the date seed, and then they're making another product again using the date seed, which for us is still in the category of a waste product, but at least we can help another business out who has the technology and the enthusiasm to make a product from the seed.
And so, Dave, I know from some of our conversations that you have a lot of other product ideas up your sleeve, but meanwhile, and so that dates sound like a very versatile value added product. So we need to watch the date paste space.
Yes.
to see where Gurra Downs goes from here. Now, Dave, what have been some of the challenges to get where you are today, particularly producing dates in the Riverland region?
We've had to become fully integrated. It's not really what we thought. It was a pretty simple process before we started this journey. We thought, well, how hard can it be? We're just growing a bit of fruit on some trees. How hard can it be? But what we've found is that we've had to become importers of sensitive plants. We've had to establish a nursery, a tissue culture date palm nursery. We've had to establish a research and development evaluation site to evaluate genetics to get the best selections, the best cultivars that are going to work, not just here in the Riverland, but Gurra Downs Date Company also works with the Northern Territory Government at the Arid Zone Research Institute, so we're looking at different cultivars there. Plus, we've also sent date palms out to more than 400 growers around Australia. So in all of these different locations, it's quite possible there's different cultivars that will perform better in different regions, whether it be tropical or subtropical, etc. So there's been the biggest challenge is not knowing which is the best cultivar to commercialise. That was the hardest one. And then also, how do you grow these? Like there's been no farm that we could have gone to and said, well, show us, what you're doing and how it's done. So it's basically meant that we've done an amazing amount of international travel and studies to look at how the trees grow. And then there's marketing as well. So, nothing happens until somebody sells something. Mm-hmm. It's an old saying I remember from my stock agent days, but nothing happens until somebody sells something. So even growing the fruit on the trees doesn't lead to success. You've then got to be successful at marketing. So we've had to do everything, and now we're recognising that we've missed out on quite a lot of income revenues because of the waste stream. So now we're coming back in and putting together the 10%ers that make the business, much more profitable, and that is predominantly now looking at the lower grade fruit and turning that into a high value product, and that's where your interest in our business, has come in from, and I respect that. I imagine most industries have those same issues.
So, Dave, what are some of the challenges moving your product around?
Fruit fly has been a big impost to us for the last 3 years. We started off marketing our dates to Adelaide, which was only 2.5 hours drive, 2.5 hours drive. So that was our leading market. And unfortunately, after quite a lot of years and building up a great client base in Adelaide, the fruit fly rules, which affect the zone in which we live in. Our farm doesn't actually have fruit fly itself, but because we're in this region that's a disclosed or declared fruit fly host area, we are no longer allowed to send dates into Adelaide or into Perth. And again, Perth was a very good market for us. So for the last 3 years, we've had to find other markets, and we haven't been able to get into those ones that we actually started cutting our teeth on marketing fruit. We want them back because they, as our production increases each year, we're going to need them to take to take some of our supply. Otherwise, we're just going to oversupply, Sydney and Melbourne, and so we can currently send to Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and they've been very important markets for us this year. But next year, when our production is going to go close to doubling, we really want to get Adelaide and Perth back on. But I don't think the fruit fly restrictions are likely to lift before then.
So, Dave, just to be clear, you can sell your product to Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, but
Yes.
you can't get your product 2 hours away to Adelaide. So then, what's the solution?
Well, I can have the fruit fumigated and send it to Adelaide and to Perth, so it's allowed to go in there if it's fumigated first. The only technical issue with that is there's no fumigation chambers operating in the riverland at the time of the year where dates are being harvested. So the government have invested large resources into fighting fruit fly. They have a lot of people on the ground. I think it's near like 200 people on the ground with vehicles driving around, identifying trees in risk areas and applying sprays. There's a wonderful program where they're dropping sterile fruit flies from aeroplanes. There's a checkpoint on the Victorian South Australian border that stops all vehicles coming and going and check for fruit, potential hosts. And there's quite a lot of quarantine conditions around fruit coming and going out of the riverland. However, there's no public fumigation chamber facilities. So from my perspective, there's a gaping hole in how it operates because there is some private businesses, predominantly citrus, I believe, who have their own fumigation chamber, but a lot of them are so busy with their own product when they are harvesting that they've got no time to take on any personal or outside business pallets in for fumigation. And then at the end of their season, which is currently now, and the same time of harvesting dates, their facilities are shut down, not operational. So there's really very limited choices unless I'm going to send the fruit to Melbourne, get it fumigated, and then receive it back, and then redistribute it to Adelaide or to Perth. So it's not impossible, but it's not conducive to an easy supply arrangement for fresh fruit, not dried dates, but fresh fruit, which is a perishable product. Every hour is important, so we don't want to be sending it east when it needs to go west.
So, Dave, just because of these rigid restrictions, how else has that impacted your business? I remember you telling me that you used to open the farm up to visitors. So are they no longer allowed? Well, they could come, but there's no point in their coming if they can't purchase your product and take it out of the region. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the emails and the phone calls come in, just as we're approaching almost every weekend. And some of these guys have been here many times over many years. But basically, we have a great following in Adelaide. It's usually like an Iraqi community or the Indian community. And there's a lot of people that have had these fresh dates as part of their culture, that when they're ready, they like to come to the farm and they pick and help pack and take fruit away with them. And it's been pretty good agribusiness for us over agritourism over a lot of years. But in the last 3 years, unfortunately, we've had to say we're not taking any visitors because ultimately, even if we do let them in the front gate, they're not going to want to leave without any fruit. And we're responsible for that fruit. And we know they're going straight back to Adelaide. So we've just got to make the apology and say, listen, we'd love to receive your visit, but you cannot take dates away. And these people will just want to keep, well, they do. They just want to keep haggling you until they can get the fruit and that's very, very important to them, particularly at Ramadan time, which is right now. Mm-hmm. They want to have their dates. So, unfortunately, that agri-tourism part of our business has left us because of fruit fly outbreaks. So again, we hope to get that back.
Yeah, I can only imagine that you're one of many smaller producers that depended on that additional revenue stream that's no longer available to you. So, Dave, if there was one message you'd like to share with our listeners in your quest to reduce food waste, what would it be? Why would other businesses or growers like yourself want to try to make something else with their waste?
Well, I think it's got to be economic driven. So, if there's an opportunity there, invest in it. From our perspective, the date paste is really good because, you don't know how sound markets are. It's a very dynamic marketplace, and we've been very successful building up our brand name and selling whole dates, and we've got a very good following there. But you just don't know what's around the corner, with competition or people changing or businesses closing, coming and going. But for us, the date paste is really great because although we're invisible on the packaging, if somebody uses date paste in a snack bar, it gives us insurance because there's two things that happen there. So we're selling our product, and then somebody else is putting it in either the supermarket shelves or the retail marketplace, and that gives us reassurance because if for whatever reason we had a problem selling our first grade fruit, we've still got placement in shops. There might be hopefully 6 different places where our date paste may be in a supermarket, and that gives us insurance because we'd hope that our on-selling customers would be very successful in what they do. But it does give us some reassurance and encouragement that our product is still receiving placement, even without the Gurra Downs branding on it.
So there's money to be made in your seconds, is what you're saying?
Yes, there is. Yes.
And on that note, Dave, thank you very much for joining us today. And I wish you all the very best for 2024. And hopefully we can check in again in 12 months' time to hear about more of the products that you're developing out of your dates. So, Dave, what you're saying, there's money to be made in your seconds. And for you, by producing an ingredient that can be added to other products, has in fact created a whole new revenue stream for Gurra Down dates. And on that note, I'd like to thank Dave for taking the time to speak with us. As Dave, I know it's a really busy time for you and that you have a plane to catch.
Thank you, Joanne. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
So that's the end of our episode today, and a big thank you to Dave Reilly from Gurra Down Dates. Who would have thought that you would find a world-renowned date producer tucked away in the Riverland district of regional South Australia? And as I mentioned earlier, I had the pleasure firsthand of seeing Dave's operation and also hearing about all the other innovative product ideas that he and his family intend to develop in the future from their not-so-perfect date range. Now, if you're wanting to get in touch with Dave or find out more about their dates and other product ranges, just go to their website, www.gurradowns.com.au, and you'll be able to find all this information there. And that wraps up another episode. Every little bit counts when it comes to tackling food waste. And remember, each one of us can make a difference. If you're wanting to keep the conversation going and be the first to hear about our latest episodes, just subscribe to www.foodwastematters.com.au. And while you're there, you can check out our past episodes and see what other guests have shared with us. And if you've got a question or want to share your food saving tips, maybe you're doing something amazing in the food waste space and want to join us on the show, just drop us a line at foodwastematters@honeyandfox.com.au. We'd love to hear from you. So on that note, I look forward to catching you in our next episode.